It's amazing. He's into it. And they do it just like they're professional athletes.
Please add me to the mailing list.
I'm so small.
I don't know why would I do that. Someone tell me it might
It's
do
a
it.
great school. Great.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is a general training in terms of not specific to Waukegan.
And I'm North Carolina, by the way, New York, till here in 78.
An overall kind of overview of.
Back in 1970. Yeah. And I want to stay in New York, based like money, New York, all that kind of stuff. 10 states in there. Hey, happy Mother's Day, all that stuff again.
Why would we want to be on
The mail aid mailing lists.
I think you have the agendas and the minutes?
Yeah,
I do.
okay,
Got
once
everything.
a day or once a week.
No, I mean, I'm interested in the topic, but the question is,
We're getting inundated.
yeah.
All right, check me too.
Do you want to,
Yeah, you can always say unsubscribe if you don't want to.
well, I guess that's true. Oh, you're just too practical. Very good.
Hello, how are you? You're running. How fast is short? Did you race that?
Yeah, that's a good job.
Oh, the presenters?
That's a good job.
I'll definitely stay. I'll definitely stay.
Right in my face.
Not for the
Well, this one I already have these.
Thank you.
I'm gonna try to stay. I'll text you right now.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, is everybody on it?
Yep, just 5 of us, I think.
If I had shoes, I would be better, but I had sandals. My feet are cold. See, if my feet are cold, I am cold.
Okay, we're going to get started in just a minute.
Okay.
Are we all ready? Okay. It is 7:02. I would like to call to order the May 11th, 2023 meeting of the Waukegan Planning and Zoning Commission. Can we have a roll call, please?
Here. Grimes?
Here.
Haug? Haynes?
Here.
Hintz? Rivera?
Here.
Rodriguez?
Here. Okay, there are 5 commissioners here, so we do have a quorum. So this is an official meeting, although there's not much business that we're going to conduct except for under old business. Is there anything we're doing on that? No.
It's just held over until the next meeting, but we're keeping the placeholder there so the public can follow.
Okay, very good. Okay, so if at any time we lose a member and another commissioner does not come to keep it at a steady 5 commissioners, we would actually lose a quorum, and I am advised by corporate counsel that we can still continue with the meeting, but it will no longer be an official meeting at that point, but we are not conducting any business anyway. Is that correct?
Correct. So once we lose quorum, we even lose the ability to vote to adjourn the meeting. So the meeting adjourns on its own. However, we are free as a public body to continue discussions as long as we don't have any final action. And because of the kind of meeting we have tonight, we just have the training. That should not be an issue.
And as long as we do not discuss any business
Well, we
in
can
the course of that,
we can discuss whatever we want. We just can't make any final action.
Are you sure that doesn't violate the Open Meetings Act?
No, because this was a properly noticed meeting. Public bodies are allowed to discuss whatever they want during meetings. They just cannot vote
Even after we lose a quorum?
after we lose a quorum. It continues to be a meeting, but the only thing that changes is our ability to take a final action, to
Okay.
take a vote.
Okay, that's why we have you here. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the minutes. The approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of April 13th, 2023.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Motion by Commissioner Anderson, seconded by Commissioner Rivera. Do we have any comments, corrections, changes to the minutes? If not, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Haynes?
Yes.
Grimes?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Rivera?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes. Motion carries, minutes are approved. Next item is audience time. We have to have this is part of every meeting. This is an opportunity for anybody who would like to address the commission on any matter, whether it's on the agenda or not. Is there anybody here that wants to address the commission? Okay, moving on, old business. Continued until June Planning and Zoning Commission meeting at petitioner's request, zoning calendar number 2703, conditional use permit for a park district recreational facility to include a golf driving range, bar and restaurant at 3391 West Beach Road in the CR Conservation Recreation Agriculture District. Do we have to take any action to continue this till the next meeting?
No, I don't believe so. It's just going to be held over.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item, item 5, Planning and Zoning Commissioner training, and that is the purpose for us being here. Are we going to sit in our seats here, or? I know one time there was talk of us coming down and joining everybody else, but the screen is there where we can see it.
Yes, I know the last time I spoke to you, I expected to have you in the audience and the trainers up there, but after speaking with them, they'd rather have you in your seats. So that's the direction we'll go, as long as you're able to see the screen comfortably and
Yeah. Can
all
everybody
of
see it
that.
okay?
So,
Okay, very good,
Thank
thank you.
you.
You want to give us a little bit of a prelude as to what?
sure. So as you know, Mr. Chairman, I've been looking for a while to get some formal training for the commission, and Rachel was able to assist us with accessing resources through the Illinois chapter of the American Planning Association. So we have Andy Cross and Katie, I'm sorry, I just drew a blank on your last name. Ashbaugh. Thank you. And Katie Ashbaugh, who are volunteering to provide this training for you this evening, spending their Thursday evening hanging out in Waukegan. So they're...
A better place to spend a Thursday evening.
Right. So I'll let them introduce themselves to you and give you some of their background and experience with all of this, but they're top-notch pros, and we're excited to have them here to train all of us, our team too. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for arranging this for us.
Absolutely, thank you for being here tonight. And I hope that you'll encourage our absent commissioners to watch the recording, the video recording that'll be on our YouTube channel and accessible through our website. We'll send it out to everybody, but if you happen to talk to any of those who missed tonight, and you can encourage them to watch it, that would be fantastic. Be beneficial for them.
Thank you.
Thanks. Who's up first? Andy?
Yeah, happy to. All right, trying to get these microphones figured out here. I have the lapel mic on, so I'll stand back a little so we don't,
You can turn it off too if you need to, somewhere.
just that. Okay. Well, great, guys. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Andy Cross, and I have been a planner for a little over 20 years. I spent about 19 years in the public sector and as a government planner, 5 years in my home state of Minnesota. And then the last 15 years, I was down in the city of Highland Park, just a stone's throw down Sheridan Road. And about a year ago, I joined a consulting firm, so now I'm in the private sector, but bring a lot of city planning experience to this.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Katie Ashbaugh. I've been a local government planner for about 9 years now. I originally moved here from Ohio, and I've worked in a few other municipalities in the region. I currently am a planner for the city of Evanston, and I have been a member of the Illinois chapter of the APA since I moved here in 2015, and I'm excited to kind of begin volunteering and presenting to you the lay of the land.
Thank you.
You bet. So Katie mentioned that she's volunteering. We do this because we believe in it. This is a training program that is a collaboration with the American Planning Association's Illinois chapter and DePaul University. Now, you've heard of the American Medical Association and other national associations like that for a profession. That's what the APA is. It's the National Association for Planners. And every state in the country has its chapter. And so the Illinois chapter is who sponsors this program. There are probably about a dozen of us as volunteers, and we do this in communities all around really all around the state. And I think we've done, gosh, about 160, 170 in total. Not me, thank God, but we've done a number of these. So it's a really neat program, and we're grateful to staff for inviting us and happy to be here to walk you through it. Because being a citizen planner isn't easy, and you all have busy lives, and you come here once or twice a month and take time out of your busy lives to take on a serious responsibility for the city of Waukegan. So we're happy to take you through the training. This is a brief intro. You saw the printouts in front of you. I encourage you to follow along because there are a couple places where it's just helpful to circle something like, yes, this resonates. And also a couple places I'll have you jot some notes down. So please do try to follow along. You saw the sign-in lists. Thank you all for putting your Hancocks on that. That way we can, with the chapter, indicate that you all took part and participated in the training. I believe you get a diploma, something to look forward to. And then also we do have evaluation forms that we'll pass out. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for a long time, and we're continually working to improve it. And a lot of the improvements have come from valuable thoughts from commissioners and citizens planners like yourself. So I'd like to begin. Katie and I will kind of trade off here so you don't get too tired of my voice. We have a lot to get through. There's like 70 slides, but we'll try to keep things moving. It's my goal to finish this up within an hour to 90 minutes, depending on questions. And there's a lot of slides, but we don't have to focus on all of them. And I promise not to sit here and read the slides to you, trusting that you guys are very capable of reading PowerPoint slides yourselves. So let's talk about the roles. Let's just start tonight by talking about the roles in the process, the roles that you'll encounter as a plan commissioner. As plan commissioners yourselves, you are citizen planners. You get to play an active role in the development and the goings-on in Waukegan. You bring years, decades of experience and insight living in the community, being a part of the community, and you bring insight that a lot of others don't. And the city council appointed you guys to that responsibility. It's a real responsibility, and it's important to take it seriously. But look at that third bullet point. You also get to go around to other communities and look at them through the eyes of a citizen planner, of a planner. I like what they did here. San Antonio's got some cool stuff going on. When you guys are on vacation in Fort Lauderdale, this is a special place. I wonder why. Or when you go to your favorite places, now you can be like, what makes this special? Why do I feel like this is a place I remember, that I look forward to coming back to? What makes it that way for you, other than being on vacation and having margaritas? What makes it bright? Or what makes a place austere? When you're like, oh gosh, Houston isn't nearly as nice as people said it was. Why? So you look at that and look at the eyes, look at new places that you go or old places through the eyes of a planner. What makes it special? And then that last bullet point, appreciate your position, appreciate the value of it, and the value you can bring, and don't pass up the opportunity to bring value to this role. It's your ideas, it's your questions, and we're going to talk a lot tonight about the importance of asking questions. That's your role. That's your responsibility, to ask the questions that nobody else is gonna. That's, the city council, they look to you to ask the questions. And that's an important part and a goal is to ask questions and appreciate your role. The elected officials, that's not you guys. You're appointed. And so the city council has long agendas. They talk dog license fees. They talk new fire engines. They talk city budget, city budget, city budget, city budget. So they're not talking about development proposals. They're not listening to the public and the impacts about on the neighborhood level. They're looking to you for that. So they're not talking land use. That's you guys. But they deal with policy direction. And it's important to have an ongoing discussion about, you know, how does the city feel about development on the west side, dense multifamily development on this commercial corridor. That's the policy discussion that you need to have an open dialogue with them. They need to have an open dialogue with you. So it's the broader policies that the elected officials deal with, and less so on your end. So what does it mean to work with elected officials? It means, that second bullet point, having an ongoing dialogue. Or when the commission recommends denial on a project after discussion and deliberation, and then the city council approves it, it's incumbent on them to say why. Here's why we did what we did. Because it shouldn't just be oh, they're going to approve this no matter what. No, there needs to be okay, we recommend denial for this, this, and this reason. This is in the findings of fact that we'll talk about. And they approved it. They need to talk about why. But look at that last bullet point. When there's a problem, you guys are going to be in a position to suggest solutions, suggest alternatives that they're not going to be in a position to think about. So again, it's about appreciating your role and what you can bring to the discussion with elected officials. City staff, professional planners. That's what Katie and I do for a living. That's what we went to school for. And you don't end up in this silly career by accident. You know, and your staff here are city planners, professional urban planners. And so it's their job to manage the zoning entitlement process. That's the special use permits, the planned unit developments. We'll talk about all of this stuff in more detail later. And their job is to work closely with the commission to provide all the information you need to make decisions. That's their role. That's their job. And to the extent you feel they can do it better, if you feel there's information gaps, that line of communication needs to be in place where you can say, you know what, I come to a commission meeting and I'm always wondering, you know, where is this? I wish we had better maps in our packet. Great. And I just pull that example out of thin air, but you take my meaning. If there's some type of information you feel will help you do your job better, talk to them. Absolutely talk to them. The third to last bullet point, educate citizens about the purpose and the process of planning. We are that city staff is where the development community and the public meet, right here in this venue. And so it's our job to educate applicants. Guys, here's what you need to expect. If you bring this application to the commission, it's going to go nowhere. We need more information out of you. That's what staff does. And then the public comes in and says, you know, I'm madder than heck and I'm not going to take it anymore. Got it. I can help. I can make sure you have a chance to talk to the commission. And so at the end of the process, the developers, you know, approved or denied, go to city staff and they say, thank you for helping me through the process and letting me tell my story. The public, who's fuming mad, says, thank you for letting me approach the commission and the city council. I didn't know how to do this. Thank you. So that's the job of the city planner, to make sure everything is working and functioning smoothly and moving forward. Look at that last bullet point. It's staff's role to explain the request. Explain it. Crystal clear. Everything about it. And the tough thing about being a city planner is you got to be the smartest person in the room. You have to know all about the code, the regulatory body, and you have to know all about the application. Every bit, as much as you can. That's the role of professional planning staff. But it's the applicant who gets up here and says, this is a good project and here's why. That's the applicant's job. Staff doesn't say, this is a good project, you should approve it. Nope, that's not staff's role. Staff's role is to say this is in the B2 zoning district. The comprehensive plan says that this area needs multi-story residential and mixed-use development. And then you can say, well, that's what this is. Well, perfect, good. That's giving you the information you need. But it's not staff's role to advocate, that's the applicant's job. So I kind of talked about this, working with staff. So the only thing I want to point on here is that last bullet point. It is incumbent on you guys as citizen planners to read the materials and be prepared for a meeting. The classic stake through the heart of a city planner is when commissioners come to a meeting, and this happens, and they sit down and they open up their envelope for the first time. What's on the agenda tonight? Because a lot of work goes into those staff reports. A lot. Again, smartest person in the room is the city planner. They know inside and out the regulatory environment and the application. And those staff reports, writing a long staff report is easy. Writing a short, effective staff report for you guys is hard. That's hard. Getting information into 2.5, maybe 3 pages, something like that. That's hard. And that's a famous truism in writing novels. Anybody can write a long novel, anybody. But writing a short novel that people read is hard. So just be prepared, and that's just so important. Look at that second bullet point. One more point I want to raise on this slide is that reviewing past cases for consistency is good, but consistency and precedent are two different things. So don't worry about precedent. Oh, if we approve this, and then somebody else comes along, does this establish a bad precedent? That is not a reason to discourage or deny an application. Consistency is essential. Treating every application the same, giving every person at the public hearing the same amount of time, we'll talk about that later, to address the commission. Consistency is important. Precedent is not something you guys need to worry about. Staff reports. This is, I mentioned them briefly already, these are the main way that city staff communicates important information to the commission. Read them. If there's something unclear, and make mark, two things. When you read these, have a goal in your mind to just underline a few things. Don't care what. The word "and," who cares? Underline a few things in every staff report. Doesn't matter what. But also, try to come up with a question. Any question. Make that a goal of yours, to come up with a question. Chances, maybe somebody will have the same one, that's fine. And maybe you don't even end up asking it because it comes up in conversation or in the staff presentation or the applicant's presentation. But every staff report you read, come up with a question. Just have that be a little goal. So make a little note on this slide in your packet, question mark or the letter Q, anything. But I think that's that's important. Look at that last bullet point. This one's on staff. We can't send out a 280-page packet on a Friday and be like, see y'all Monday. Like, no. That's just not fair. It's not reasonable. And so many communities send packets out a week ahead of time. The downside is that the information gets a little stale before the meeting in the commissioners' minds. But adequate time to read information is essential. And that's just good departmental policy. You can see in here staff reports the essential information. I have no doubt that staff here covers all these already. But what is that, about the fifth bullet point down? Standards of review. Every staff report will have quotations from the zoning code and give you the standards that you need to review these applications. And we're going to talk more about standards later and what they are and why they're important. But every staff report will give you the tools so you don't have to say, I don't like this. I don't like the color of this. That's why I'm not going to vote for it. Or this neighborhood's already had enough redevelopment. So the standards give you what to talk about. They tell you what to talk about at the meeting. So you don't have to just be like, I don't know, is this good or not? How do I judge it? The standards of how you judge it. So you can rely on those. Every staff report will have them. So you can rely on those to determine whether or not it's a good plan and how you approach it. This is a slide, just be aware of Waukegan's other commissions, other bodies, and they have their own expertise, and so be aware that they're out there. It's always a dream of mine when I was a city planner to have commissions actually meet one another once in a while. Never really got around to it, but it's a great idea. But just because all these other commissions are appointed just like you guys, and there's residents who take time out of their day, their busy week, their busy month, to meet and talk about and help the city of Waukegan. So just be aware that they're out there. Mr. Chair, what are two other commissions that the city has?
Historic preservation.
Okay.
Economic development.
Yeah, perfect.
Community development. Community development.
Yeah. Well, and think that they are bodies of expertise. And so if a petition comes before you that has historic preservation related issues, it's very okay to say, whose input I'd like, or who I'd like to come to the next hearing is the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission to get their input. That's great. Or even ask staff to just get some input, but just remember they're out there because they are as dedicated as you are to their specific roles as you are to this one. Other key actors, legal counsel. Marcus, are you at every meeting?
Yes.
Okay, that is a blessing. That's wonderful to have legal counsel. Yes, isn't it wonderful?
Yes. Yes.
Good. Well, I'm so glad to hear you guys say that.
Yes.
And it sounds like you avail yourselves.
We need them.
Okay. So that's that's great, and that is simply a best practice. A lot of communities don't make that investment. And the fact that Waukegan does invest in a consistent presence of legal counsel is a huge benefit. So good. It sounds like you take advantage of it. You recognize the importance of it. It just keeps things moving quickly, and then also can really nip a lot of issues in the bud. Be like, nope, no, you're wrong, sir. You know, it can help so much, and it brings in a real gravitas.
Keep us out of trouble.
That's right. The public is a key actor. You know, they're the reason you guys do what you do, to help the public, to get input from the public, digest it, and incorporate that into the decisions and the deliberations. So it's important to listen. And we'll probably touch on this later. And in fact, we will. I won't get into this now. But the public does not talk to the applicant. I don't like, the last project you built was crud. No, Mr. Chair, you say, questions are directed to the chairman, please. That's your role. We'll talk about the chairman's role in a bit. The public is not here to have a discussion. They're not here to start bashing, you know, corruption, this, and greed. Okay, whoa, you know, that's not it. Now, listen, okay, that's fine, but be courteous and that. So, and we'll talk more about public hearing procedure and that kind of thing later. Who gets a bad rap? Developers. Is it deserved sometimes? Yeah. You know, there are good developers and there are bad developers. There are really stellar doctors, there are kind of meh doctors. You know, it's in every role. There are incredible attorneys and there are attorneys who are like, no. So it's every job in the world has people who excel at it at a gold standard level and people who are, you know, like are bumbling through their careers, possibly lives. So they can get a bad rap. But it's essential to have developers bring ideas forward. Because who else is gonna? You know, the city's not gonna build apartment buildings. You know, so it's essential to have developers in a community. But your job, you need to appreciate what their role is. Their role is to provide all the information to you. Their role is to answer all of your questions. And if you feel like you're not getting your questions answered, that's a problem. That's a problem. And that you can say, you know, any one of you can say, Mr. Chair, I've asked this 3 ways in 3 different ways, question 3 different ways, and I still feel like I'm not getting an answer. That's okay to say that. You also need to phrase your question clearly. What do I want to know? You know, and your question has to be reasonable, not like, how much do you make in a year, sir? He doesn't have to tell you that. Are these going to be rental or owner-occupied units? He doesn't have to tell you that. What are these going to rent for? He doesn't have to tell you that. But do you have 6 guest parking spaces or 8? Well, we're not really sure. Okay, when are you going to know that? Because I won't feel comfortable if you only have 6. Well, we're not sure. Well, we'll come back on that. Okay, but I'm not going to make a decision until you tell me. So if there's something that's important to you, is to use that word again, incumbent. It is incumbent on the developer to give you that information, and that's really that 4th bullet point there. But they do play an important role again. So walk a mile in their shoes. All right, developers work in all kinds of different communities with different rules. You know, they can be in a public hearing down in Lake Forest on Monday and then come to see you guys on a Thursday. Whew! I mean, that's in totally different rules, different cultures of a community in downtown Lake Forest versus downtown Waukegan. And so they know that you got to pay to play. They know they have to spend $10,000, $15,000 on architectural drawings and civil engineering drawings to even get to the table for this discussion. And they can be denied. They can be. Staff helps them put themselves in the best position. That's our job. You know, like, no, you're landscaping. They're not going to grant you this variation for no landscaping. They're not going to. Okay? You know, so they'll come to you with a landscaping plan. So, but they can absolutely spend, tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars in soft costs, and then it ends up being a denial. And they know that. That's all part of the pro forma. It does come down to profit. You know, profit isn't a reason for you to grant a variation for an extra story. That's not it. But if the numbers don't work, projects don't work. And developers they are business people. They do that to make a living. And they have teams of attorneys and architects and civil engineers. And so when the developer is before you, they are spending $2,000 an hour to appear before you. And they come to you before one meeting. You can know in your souls that they have prepared for this meeting before you tonight for 3 months. 3 months of work and thousands of dollars to be here before you. And so what has broken my heart, and I've seen in other communities as a consultant, is I will see developers come up and they will try to tell their story, and the commission's got their mind made up, and they don't ask a single question. And and this developer has been planning this meeting for months, and he's got his land use attorney, and he's got his whole team right there. And the commission will just, okay. All right, well, I find this does not meet the standards. A motion to recommend denial to the village council. All in favor? Aye. And the developer just walks out, head hung low, because they didn't even get a chance. So just be aware of the resources and the emotional, I guess you could say, investment that goes before any developer to just get one chance before your body, before the City of Waukegan Plan Commission to tell their story. Just be aware of that and the importance that you guys play. Quick slide here, just be aware of other jurisdictions in play. Often municipal zoning approval is just one step, and there's still several other boxes to check after the meeting tonight. If you know what I mean, like after we get zoning approval, then we've got to go and work with the reclamation district and a myriad others. So just be aware of these other jurisdictions, and that this is often one step in the process. The Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning is the regional planning authority. Be aware in the back of your mind that they exist. They have a lot of resources. They are an incredible source of knowledge and information, rather, for planning organizations all around the metropolitan area, 7 counties metropolitan area. So just be aware of CMAP. You may see some of their research appear in your documents at one point in time. So I'll close this. Thanks for your attention here in this opening chapter. Just a little discussion about the Illinois chapter, and there are wonderful benefits to a membership. And also we have a state conference every year where we do a plan commissioner training, and that is worth attending even if you've gone through this. A lot of the same material, but we do a mock hearing, and that's great because even the city attorneys get in the game, and we bring up every scenario that commissioners might run into. Somebody who won't give up the podium even after they've used their time, you name it. And it's just a wonderful training opportunity. So, staff will always have resources and information about that. So, any immediate questions about kind of the roles? No is an okay answer. There's a lot to cover. Okay. All right. Well, Katie, we'll talk about a bit the responsibilities that go with being a plan commissioner.
Hello. See if I can I don't need to lean over the mic. I don't have one of the.
It's a 180, so it stays like that.
Okay.
It picks up the sound.
Okay,
this
great.
way from there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so Andy's already kind of touched on some of this, but I'll go into a little bit more detail. So first, as you're, is it the space bar?
No, right arrow.
Oh. This one? Oh.
There you go.
Sorry, my apologies. So one of the things that he did talk about was the importance of being prepared for your meetings. So he did go through the staff report, the content that's generally in that, and how that relates to the application from the developer, and how important it is to read that material in addition to review the plans. Something else that's really important for you to do is to visit the site where the project's being proposed, so you can kind of take into consideration the existing conditions of the property as well as what's around it, and try to get a feel and visualize what's being proposed and if it fits within the context of that area. And then, of course, ask staff if you have any questions, preferably before the hearing, if you can, just so that they can try to get those answers for you, if not in the phone call, but then at the meeting. And then in some commissioners and communities where I've worked before, what they'll typically do is maybe they'll ask a question of staff, but then they'll also end up purposefully asking it on the floor at the meeting because they want that information on the record said out loud if it's not part of the staff presentation directly, or if they want to make sure that the applicant speaks to that or can clarify something that is missing or could be expanded upon in their application. So as far as playing an active role, Always let staff know if you will or won't be able to attend. You kind of went through this at the beginning of your meeting, but quorum is very important. So I have had to cancel a couple of meetings over the past year. Not many, but one or two, just because someone was sick or we already were really cutting it close with quorum and we end up having to cancel. The sooner we're able to know that, the better. There are applicants, whether it's a developer or you have a resident trying to do something to their house that you're considering for a garage. They're, planning to come to this meeting, and the sooner that they know that the meeting will be canceled, they'll be very appreciative of that, as will any members of the public that plan to attend, because then staff can immediately post it on the website, get the sign out, and people will know that it's not happening. So continuing on with your responsibilities, again, Andy did touch on this, but it's really important to kind of hold decorum in the meeting and make sure that there's a sense of order in the meeting. I know that sometimes members of the public can be excited, particularly animated about their position on a particular project, but you all, of course, and particularly the chair, can set the tone of the meeting and really make sure that the public is seated, they don't shout from the audience. Obviously, we're being recorded right now. Getting everything on the record is important. So if anybody does speak, it's important it is in a mic and they're not disrupting the order of business. So, and also that's why you're on the dais, to kind of give you that elevated sense of importance in the room for the decisions that you're making. I touched on making comments on the record. But yeah, just to I do often have to kind of remind members of the public in my role to make sure they're in the mic, or they'll get up and they'll go to the screen and I'm like, here's a microphone before you go up there to show what you're looking at. So that's something that the chair or staff can assist with when people are trying to illustrate their point from the public. Continuing on, so you did call the meeting to order. So I don't know, does this body have rules and procedures adopted? Okay, so whatever you have, those Robert's rules should typically, if it's in your code or in the rules, will be the default. So just make sure that you're following your rules and procedures, and if there's ever a question, you are fortunate to have legal counsel here to assist when you aren't sure what motion to make or where you are in the process. It is important to know when you're opening and closing a hearing. We'll get back to that a little bit later. But really, it's also important that, and particularly with the chair, where you're taking the lead on it, making sure that people are called upon when spoken to, at least if it's from the public. And I don't know how strict you are with when you let staff speak. Some communities can be a little more informal, or staff will raise their hand and just speak. But it's your preference if you call on someone before they speak, or if you're in deliberations, you may, I don't know if they have the lights behind there to like, how do they tell the chair they want to speak? Do they just raise their hand? Okay. However you communicate that, just make sure that everybody is given also an opportunity to speak and have their opinions be heard. Additionally, again, Andy mentioned this, but there are standards that you'll be evaluating each of these projects against depending on the type of zoning relief. The different types of zoning relief we'll cover a little bit greater detail later, but when you're reviewing a project, when you go to the site, when you're looking at the staff report, those all are going to come down to, do they meet the standards or not for that type of zoning relief? And then if you feel all of the standards are met, you can feel confident in voting in the affirmative. If any one of them is not met, even just one standard, if you don't feel it's met, is justification to vote no. You just vote with your conscience and how you feel those standards are met. And let's see. It's also important to remember that those that are not present, in addition to those that are here, obviously when people are against something, they are more likely to come out and tell you than when they are in favor of something, they're not going to come out and say, yes, I'm supportive of it. That doesn't happen as often, if ever. So just kind of keep in mind who is in the room and who isn't when there are projects that appear controversial, they may not be as controversial simply when you're hearing the most angry group of people when you're evaluating these projects. So some items not reviewed by the Plan Commission. Essentially, anything in the city code that staff has the ability to enforce, this body does not need to enforce upon it. So this would be any building code violations, fire code violations, property maintenance issues, private security, and then also stormwater management is another one. You're really evaluating based on, is the use appropriate? Is the height appropriate? Is the distance between the lot lines appropriate? Is there enough parking? Those are the things that you are all responsible for looking at. These other things are in the code, and you have city staff that are going to make sure that the applicant, whether it's a developer or just a homeowner, meets those codes. So you shouldn't be denying things because they never mow their grass and they've got some property maintenance tickets, but they want a garage larger than what's allowed. That shouldn't be dictating how you vote on a decision, on a variation, for example.
And I've just seen so many discussions and even projects delayed because one commissioner just had such concerns about stormwater drainage and flooding. And it's like, well, I'm really concerned about that. Even though there's a memo from the city engineer saying that this meets all the city's drainage and grading requirements. Like, that's what he gets paid to do when he's good at it, you know, and we're here to look at the zoning code and not get hung up on that. And so just something to keep in your mind.
Yeah, to again emphasize that it is state and local law that a property cannot direct water onto another adjacent property. And then if they do, that person can file a complaint and they'll have to fix it. So when you're evaluating things, flooding you do not need to worry about it. They will have to, they can't do it. It is illegal for them to purposefully direct water onto any neighboring property. It must go toward the right of way or be self-contained on the property. So that's just something to keep in mind. I've worked at several communities where that does seem to be an issue.
Personally, I take staff recommendations very seriously.
That's great to hear. We appreciate it. Another thing that is not the purview of this body would be financing. So does Waukegan have any active TIF districts? So if there's a project that's coming through for zoning entitlement, for example, and it's a planned development, and they also are getting TIF funding or tax increment financing from the city, this body is not really looking at can they build the project and is this amount that the city is giving them appropriate or not. That is really what the city council has been elected to do. You are all just focusing more on, is this project appropriate on this site? Is the use appropriate, height, bulk, parking, all of those things I mentioned before, is that appropriate? And then you'll make recommendations to make sure the project's the best project for the city to invest its money in your recommendation. Other items not reviewed. This is a bit more obvious. Interior design, we're not HGTV, so you can't really dictate that. Internal business operations, that really only gets down to like if it's a special use and you're limiting hours of operation, but other than that, you should not be dictating the floor plan. There are building code requirements for how large bathrooms can be, how many bathrooms are required, how many exits there need to be. There are other requirements that are informing the way that the floor plan is laid out on the inside. Rents, sale prices, and unit mix, that's another thing that if there's a TIF district project and there's apartments, that's something that the city council is looking at when they're considering doing a public-private partnership with the developer. And then business competition, you're not really here to say, is your business viable or not? They're here because they think it's viable.
And if somebody's getting a special use permit for a veterinarian's office, oh, we already have 5 of those in Waukegan. We're not going to approve this special use permit. No, that's the vet's problem, not this commission's. Your role is to look at the veterinary use itself. Okay, are they going to have dog walking? Are they going to do boarding? Do they have appropriate waste management? How big is the site? Look at the land use issues, the parking. But it's not your concern that, oh, this guy's business doesn't have a prayer. We're already saturated with veterinarians' offices. Or salons or something like that, but those never come before you guys. So business competition, not your purview. It's more really a land use discussion.
What comes up in our meetings often is dollar stores and auto repair shops. And it seems to be like an overriding position by a lot of people up here that, gee, we have too many of those already. And how should that enter into our how should I say it, our decision as to whether something is a benefit to the community or not? You're saying that we're not supposed to take that into consideration, is that correct?
That is correct. May I, Katie?
Yeah, of course.
And Commissioner Grimes, you have a...
Yeah, that's in the business plan that's submitted. Who your competition is, where they stand, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that doesn't come to us as part of what?
If your concern is, a proliferation of a certain type of business, this dais isn't how you approach it. That you sit down with city leadership and say, we really need to look at a broad policy. We need to approach, this is an issue that is of concern to the whole commission, and we'd really like to come up with an approach about how to handle it. But a case-by-case basis like this isn't the tool. There are tools. There are absolutely tools out there. But it's not a case-by-case application. Yes, yes, love your business, no.
And Andy, if I can make a
Please.
clarification. So, of course, I've heard, not just in this community, but in other communities where there's a particular type of business that's dominant, predominant. There's a lot of them. But I've never seen this board make a decision based on that. It's usually just a stray comment. And I want to make sure that the record's clear that they pay attention to the standards, and though it might be a concern when they make their decisions, it is based on the standards.
It's great to hear. Thank you. Great to hear.
And that is true, and I'm just glad that this is being clarified, because sometimes there is confusion, and I hear it from some of the commissioners as to whether or not that should be taken into consideration when they're making a decision. So I'm glad you're clarifying that for us.
But, yeah, our staff does that. So again, that's the role they play. We depend on them. Like you said earlier, it's a little redundancy, but it's true.
There are some communities with zoning codes where they have a use or a business type that's less preferable, and as a means of discouraging it, instead of they've moved it to the special use list for a particular zoning district instead of just taking it out of a district or districts altogether. Now, obviously, there are certain uses it's difficult to prohibit some of them from the entire city, but there are other means to limit the proliferation of certain business types. The special use process is not, or conditional uses here, my apologies, are not intended to be like a additional red tape to discourage a business type. If you don't want it in that district, then I'm not sure the zoning text amendment process in Waukegan, whether a city can initiate it or if you need a separate applicant, but that would be something you can then request staff to process and take it through the zoning text amendment process through this body at a public hearing, and then to your city council to consider amending a zoning district's list of special uses. So.
Good questions.
All right. Touched on this a little bit already, but as the chair, you're to make sure that the agenda is followed and everything is moving smoothly. Only one person speaking at once, and that everyone's speaking into the mic, and that everyone has a chance to be heard and is given a fair and equitable opportunity to share their opinions, and also make sure staff, if staff is doing a presentation, that they have ample time to get their information, that the applicant's given ample time, and that the public also has sufficient time to speak. And I will think the next slide here does losing my track in the slides, my apologies. So, typical hearing procedure. This is something that is really critical to help make sure that you are not opening yourself up to any liability, but also to maintain order for the meeting. It was mentioned before, but consistency is key. So if you're teaching every single applicant the same, and you can vote your conscience based on things if they meet the standard or not, but if you're giving everyone the same process, then you have a stronger case if something were to happen in the legal system. So first, there should be an opening statement by the chair, where typically you'll describe the purview of this body, what you're going to be considering. In the community I work in now, the chair also generally kind of limits, he alludes to the limit for time being for people that are interested to speak, and then he calls the meeting to order. When you get through, do we do the minutes first, or do you do those at the end of the meeting?
We do them first.
You do them first. You go on to the minutes and you approve the draft minutes. Those are then going to be published on the website. And then usually the chair should read into the record what the request is. So what's the address, if there's a case number for it, and then what's all of the relief being requested, and who's the applicant. Most important, if you let the staff go first, if they can speak first, they're going to go through basically the site data, like how big is the property, where is it, what's the zoning district, what are the zoning districts surrounding it, what are the existing land uses around it, what is allowed on the property, what are they asking to do. So those are all the things that staff is doing. They're not advocating, they're just giving you the facts about the project that you're going to be weighing. And then the applicant is going to come in and say, this is why I think you should approve this, and try to explain why they think they meet the standards, what are they doing to address traffic, how are they making it look less tall even though it's several stories high. They are selling it to you. But as Andy said, they're here to build the community. So you're going to take the facts, take all these pluses, and then inevitably the public's going to come up and talk, and they're going to get their time to say all of their concerns usually.
Excuse me, Commissioner Grimes wanted to say something.
Oh, sure. I wasn't sure if you were waving at the chair. I'm sorry. What's your question?
I don't have a question, I have a statement.
Oh.
You're wrong about the way we do it. We have staff recommendations at the end of the process. What are staff recommendations?
So I can kind of, I think what they're presenting to us is a typical template, but our rules of procedure said, you're absolutely right, Commissioner Grimes, our rules of procedure are our own, and so we follow it in a different order, a different format. And so in different communities, I'll see the order changed up, but the important thing is to have those rules and to stick to them, like Katie was saying, to avoid litigation, liability in the future.
Yeah, our chairman and you, we're protected. Because our minutes, if you heard, we get the minutes early, and he runs down the list. So our chairman has been doing this a long time, and staff is awesome. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I also make a comment after Commissioner Anderson?
Oh, no, go ahead
I'm
first.
done, thank you.
I just wanted to mention to you, as you know, I've been trying to change some things a little bit, and I will be coming forward to you with a proposal to change our rules of procedure so that, in fact, the staff report is on the front end. That's my goal, to have it follow this pattern that they're presenting to you.
And following that up, I would hope, given, 90% of the time or 95% of the time, this goes very smoothly. But there are a few times when it doesn't. And I think having a 3-minute, that could be extended if we allow it, but having a 3-minute public comment would be really helpful.
So we do have a 3-minute established time period for audience time for public comment, but we would have to establish that if we wanted to use that during the testimony, the hearing portion.
When we have people disagreeing.
Yes.
Sometimes.
And so since you know that I'll be proposing some edits to
the rules of procedure for the commission. If you'll take a look at those, if you don't have them handy, they are on the website. And let me know if you have any proposals as well that we can add to that review. That would be helpful.
Can you say specifically where on the website to go to get that?
If you just go to the search box on the front page, search Planning and Zoning Commission rules, it should pop up in the first 2 or 3 items there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. As Marcus mentioned, Corporation Council mentioned, there are other communities that do it differently. It's really up to this commission to decide how you want to run your meetings. In my experience, it is most helpful when staff does present first, just because you're about to go hear the people that want the project and the people that don't, and staff's role, you know, they're working for the city, they work for you, they're just trying to give, the role of staff is to give you the facts and a neutral perspective on it. And also, it is important that all of the items that are in the staff report, unfortunately, not everyone may read them. Not everyone that comes to the meetings, they may not have read the staff report, they just got the notice in the mail saying to come to the meeting. So having all of those points of information set on the record is important to also kind of, it ultimately will help justify however this body ends up voting when all of those items are on the record. But to your point, if it comes later in the meeting, it's the discretion of you guys and how you want to do your thing. I personally would recommend doing the presentations first and then public comment, just because, again, you don't know what they're commenting on when they're commenting first, and it can also, some of their questions or concerns may or may not get addressed during the presentation, but that's just really my experience. I don't know if you want to add to that.
It comes down to education, and the public comes here not knowing anything about an application, and to only learn about it from the developer and then have a chance to come and address the commission, I think has some drawbacks. And it can be important for the public to learn from city staff first and get all that information, and probably get some questions and concerns answered from the staff presentation, and then the applicant does their talk, and the public is like, oh, okay. And so then when they get up here, they are educated, more educated about the project than they might have been if then staff, if they get up there and talk all about their complaints, and then staff runs through the actual zoning regulations and what the variations are, and then the public's like, oh, well, I guess I didn't need to worry about that. So, something to consider.
That's great that city staff will be able to educate the public in the beginning of the meeting. But the only problem that I may have is when staff recommends denial in the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
That's the only concern that I would have.
And our staff have indicated that they do not plan to make recommendation to recommend approval or denial.
Right.
They used to at one point, but then it seems that the position of city staff is to just give the facts one way or another and make recommendations as far as considerations that need to be taken, you know, in considering the plan.
Yeah, that's a best practice.
But without making, as you mentioned earlier, city staff's role is not to advocate.
Right. It's, I think it depends on the community and the code. In some communities, it may be codified that staff, or it may be the director or the zoning administrator, shall recommend X, Y, and Z. Other communities, it doesn't say one way or the other, so then it ends up being more of a coming from the city manager's office on what things they want the department heads to make recommendations, not just to this body, but to any of the bodies. But to that point, I know that communities as a whole are kind of moving more toward, here are the facts, and if you decide to approve it, here are some conditions you can consider if you decide to approve it. And then that way, if you feel comfortable approving it, and sending it on to the city council.
And that's what our staff are doing now.
Right,
And
okay.
another point I just wanted to raise, with regard to audience time, okay, you witnessed our audience time. That is not part of the hearing, okay? That is a separate audience time that we have at the beginning of each meeting, because sometimes there are people that want to come and address commission on something not related to anything that's on the agenda. Okay, and so what we do is we just give anybody who wants to address the commission an opportunity to do so at the beginning of the meeting, and we also let them know that this is not part of the hearing, that there will be a hearing, and they will have an opportunity to speak during the hearing. So that's what this is. So that's why we have it at the very beginning, because sometimes people want to address the commission, they don't want to stay for 2 hours, you know, just to be able to speak.
Sure.
to the commission.
It is just Open Meetings Act requirement that you offer public comment, but to your point, it doesn't necessarily matter if it's at the beginning or at the end of the meeting. I know Evanston City Council, for example, does do public comment at the beginning of every City Council meeting before they begin business, but the Land Use Commission, which is a recommending body, they do public comment at the end, but it's at the discretion of the body when they do their rules. But yeah, are they, I guess, Corporate Council, are they speaking to the agenda items in the public comment, or?
Oh, let me just say 2 things. So
Sure.
Commissioner Grimes is leaving, I think, just temporarily. So right now we don't have quorum. As I mentioned, this is just a discussion item. It doesn't affect what's happening. But just to make a record. As to the public comment, yes, the audience time at the beginning before all of the hearings are general statements made by the public that may or may not have anything to do with the items on the agenda, and the chair is always good about letting people know whatever you say here is not under oath and is not going to be evidence or testimony in the hearing. If you want it to count in the hearing, and you want to say it during the audience time, you're going to have to say it again during the actual hearing when you're under oath, when you've stated your name and everything like that.
Okay. Well, that's with public comment. So that's how you handle for non-agenda items typically. And in my experience, it is typically it can get a little muddy if you have people that may speak to agenda item and then they presume that, well, I know you are careful about it, but it is something you may consider if you end up moving it to the end of the meeting, just so people are not confused. But it is okay to go ahead and do a time limit on how long they speak. The rules in the City of Evanston.
During the hearing?
Yes. During the actual hearing, when you open the hearing, specifically where I work currently, we actually just adopted rules 2 weeks ago, or updated rules. And one of the things that the chair wanted was if someone is speaking on behalf of a group, he has allowed for them to have additional time, but he wants a list of names of people that the person's actually representing as a means to kind of validate that they are in fact speaking on behalf of a group of people and not just getting up there and saying, I'm representing such and such. So that's something that you can do if you would like, and it just needs to be, if you mention something to that effect in your opening statement and then also right before the public hearing starts and you're consistent, that's all you can really do. But the important thing is to just be consistent and treat everyone fairly, and not to arbitrarily give people more or less time. Also, that can be something that people may perceive the wrong way and open up to liability. So after you get all of the questions from the public, it's important to document all of the questions that are received and that you restate all of the questions. And at this point, do you typically give the applicant wait for the...
So, yeah, just one point that I'd like to raise here is that the public during their testimony will have questions. That's good. But don't facilitate a back and forth between the public and the applicant. No. Write down the questions. And perhaps you do this. That's great. That's the best practice. Accept all the questions. Okay, we understand you have a traffic concern. Okay, got it. Okay, and you're worried about pet noises at night. Got it. Okay, good. Next person. Next person. And so then you'll say, okay, anybody else have a statement? Nope, we're done. Okay, here are the questions I've heard. And you'll run through them. And then the applicant will come up and you all will take turns, or whomever, asking those questions of the applicant. That way things keep moving. And instead of the applicant coming up, no, Mr. Chair, there will be no animal noises at night. Okay, next. So that's the way to do it. Get all the questions at once, write them down, everybody write them down so that you can work together to make sure you've got them. And then when you restate them, you can be like, oh, no, somebody else had a question about the 2-lane traffic and whether they're going to back up onto Green Bay Road. Okay, So now everybody, we have all the questions. All right, petitioner, please approach the podium. And now we're going to go down this list of questions. Boom.
And just for the record, we do have a quorum again.
Thank you.
Okay.
I really like that, because there've been a couple of times when I felt like the public was kind of getting into more than a conversation, and then you're making judgments about who's right, who's,
Absolutely.
and it becomes really difficult. Sometimes we have histories with some of these people, or we may not, but still, you know, having that kind of structure, I think, would be, and we do it most of the time. They're just outliers sometimes, and
Every now and then.
every now and then, and those are the ones that we all remember.
Great.
So,
And then once the commission has all the information, you know somebody from the public is going to hear something and be like, Mr. Chair, I have another question.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's at your discretion, you know, like, okay, we'll accept, you know, who else? So you can open up the, you know, open up the podium again, let people come up. But another practice is to say, okay, we're going to close the public comment portion right now, all right? Because the commission needs to deliberate. Again, I don't want to be here till 11:30 tonight. You know, like the commission, we have a good list of questions, and then, or certainly you may approach with one more question. Okay, sure. So it doesn't have to be a hard and fast rule, but you know, you're the chair, and there's got to be like some reason here. Okay, no, public comment portion is in. The commission needs to deliberate now, and so that gets to the yellow square, second row. Commission discusses the case,
Yes.
and then you know, and then it's okay. I'm ready to entertain a motion. You know, and that's, we just keep things moving, keep things moving. All right, sorry.
No, you're fine. So another thing, you all, after you go through the public's questions, of course, if any of you have questions that are different from that's the time to also ask those of the applicant, and then they'll be able to speak to those again, and then you can go into deliberation afterward. Typically, you can go into deliberation and use the standards as a talking point. Some communities, the chair will kind of lead the discussion, and they'll have kind of written a draft findings of fact of whether or not the standards are met or not met, and those are then kind of launching pads into, well, no, I didn't really feel this standard was met, and this is why. But what? And then another commissioner will say, well, what if we add this condition of approval? Would this then would we be able to consider that standard met if we approve it with this condition? So that's really all the back and forth that's going on during the deliberations. And then ultimately, there'll be a findings of fact that you all agree upon, and then you can make your motion to recommend or make your motion to approve, whatever the case is, and what you're determining about, if you're a determining body or recommending body on that item. And important thing is just go through the standards into the record before you take your vote. So we kind of already covered this, but again, just making sure everyone has the same amount of time to speak, being really mindful of that. And I don't know if you have a timer where it kind of like starts to beep a little bit to let them know, that can be helpful, or if staff has a timer.
Yeah, a quick story is that, and look at that last bullet point, time limits are okay. They are a best practice. And straight up down in Highland Park, during the city council meetings, the mayor holds her iPhone up to the microphone, and that's loud. So everybody knows. And she'll put it down, but there's a little bit of public shaming there. If somebody feels like they are so important that they can go over their 3 minutes. You know, and then so the mayor's not going to bang the gavel and kick them out, but people are staring daggers at them, because everybody knows their 3 minutes are up. And during COVID, I think Marcus and I worked together in Highland Park. We had public hearings on COVID, and I would use an online timer, you know, that you just on some website, set it to 3 minutes, and when that hit 0, it went over the microphone on Zoom, loud, and everybody knew your 3 minutes are up. And again, the chairman would let them go. But there's kind of just some pressure there, because everybody is like, dude, your time is up. I got cut off at 3 minutes. She got cut off at 3 minutes. How come this jag gets to talk for 6? So there's 3 minutes of school. You know, just have it in your mind. And again, announce it ahead of time and enforce it fairly. Those are the pillars of enforcing of having a time limit. Announce it ahead of time, right before the public hearing, you know, something like that. Because again, nobody wants to be here till 11:30. Nobody. And you guys, meetings call to order at 7. By 9:30 or 10, who's thinking straight? Who's thinking straight? So it's to the benefit of everybody to keep things moving.
And you know, our meetings usually don't last that long.
Okay.
We had one marathon meeting.
They happen.
Ago, that went, 2 big issues, yes. That went till after midnight.
Oh.
That was the longest meeting we've ever had, over 5 hours.
Unbelievable.
Usually, we're done and gone within an hour.
Okay.
So we've had them as quick as 15 minutes, you know, so we don't usually have that type of a situation, just every now and then. But the thing is that we've already discussed, you know, the situations when we do have a hot item, when the room is packed, and you know that a lot of people are going to want to speak. We've kind of discussed some procedures as to how to handle it, so that everybody has a chance to speak, and yet we're not, you know, dragging it out till midnight. And you know, I was the president of the school board here in Waukegan for 8 years, and ran the meetings, and I kind of learned how to control the meeting. So,
Good.
Well, thank you very much. And we, you know, I don't. The one thing I don't want to do is to just set up so many rules and guidelines that we feel like we're just being bound by, you know, by a lot of unnecessary rules. It's just those occasional
Yep, that'll
times,
happen.
you know, when we do have a.
And so if there's a lot of people in here, you know, it's okay to say how many people are planning to approach the commission tonight with comments. And if you see 20 hands go up, it's like, okay. You know, none of us want to be here till midnight. I propose that we have a 3-minute testimony limit this evening. I will be enforcing it fairly and consistently. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And when people know that, it's okay. Okay, I have 3 minutes, you know, and if somebody unfolds their paper, get your timer ready. But most people are like, okay, I have this to say and this to say, and this. Okay, thank you very much. A minute, because they know they have 3 minutes, and they also want to get out of here, you know, and catch Seinfeld.
And another thing that I do, the few times that we've had a lot of people want to speak, if I notice that it starts getting repetitive and people are saying the same thing, you know, person after person, what I will sometimes do is just tell them that, you know, if you have something new that hasn't been.
If everybody can turn off your mics when you're turn them on when you are, that will help that.
So anyway, so I've asked people to, you know, if you're going to be just repeating the same thing, you know, could you please give somebody else a chance to speak that wants to say something different?
Yeah.
So we've done that, and also another thing we've done too is when we've had a lot of people, we have asked if there's a spokesman that wants to speak on behalf of the group, and then that person is given more time. So, but these are very rare situations.
Good, glad to hear it.
And he swears everybody in at the same time.
Excellent,
Yes.
excellent. Another best practice. Keep going.
What the last thing to just mention is the number of people speaking. Oh, I turned it off because of the thing. One last thing to mention is just that if the whole room is full of people that are against something, there may or may not be people that are also just didn't come that might be in favor. So just take into consideration what you're hearing and how relevant their comments are to whether or not that particular item does or doesn't meet the applicable standards. Now with that, findings of fact. The findings of fact, as we've kind of touched on throughout this presentation, they are there to serve as just a grading system, so to speak, on how appropriate or best suited a project is for that particular site. So you're taking into consideration, again, existing conditions of the surrounding area, the surrounding zoning, what does the comprehensive plan say for the future land use, how is traffic going to impact negatively to the surrounding area. Those are all things that kind of speak to the findings of fact, and if the findings of fact are met or not met. And then, of course, during the hearing and what the applicant says, your staff presentation, and then all of the public comment, all of that together is your evidence to then ultimately support whether or not each of those standards are met or not met. Even just one standard not being met is justification for you to vote no on something. Key thing, setting a precedent. Andy mentioned this earlier, but you are not setting a precedent on any one individual project, whether you vote in favor or against. Every project has its own merits. You're evaluating them for the standards, and every property is unique. Even if the project is similar, the property and its surrounding conditions are still different, property to property, project to project. So voting yes on one vet office in one location may be appropriate, but if you vote and recommend no on another one in another location, there may be unique things that were justification to vote no for it in that particular spot. As long as you're referencing the standards to when you vote no, then that's sufficient. So findings of fact, where do they come from? Illinois Supreme Court case, LaSalle National Bank of Chicago versus Cook County. So this really just says zoning is constitutional, so we can have it, it's allowed, and municipalities can use it to regulate how properties are developed. And the LaSalle factors, they're already embedded into your zoning code for your standards for conditional uses. So how is it going to negatively impact the adjacent properties? Is it promoting, it's not going to harm the public health, safety, or welfare, public versus hardship to the owner. I will just skip to this next slide. This is what's in your code. So to go through that, it will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity. So this is not going to negatively impact any of the adjacent properties. That's really, to summarize that one. Adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and or necessary facilities have been or are being provided. Most of the time, we're in a developed area, the utilities are already there. Your city already has fire and police, so 9 times out of 10, that standard is probably going to be met. Item 6, the proposed conditional use is not contrary to the objectives of the current comprehensive plan. Sometimes you'll get something that may be in conflict with the plan, but it's in the zoning code, it's listed as a conditional use, so they're allowed to come before you and they're allowed to ask for it, but it may or may not actually meet what that part of the comprehensive plan says. 7, the conditional use shall in all other respects conform to all of your other codes. Basically, this one is typically met because there'll be conditions of approval or other city codes that they're gonna have to follow. Just because they're a special use doesn't mean they're not gonna meet other things in your city code. We kind of touched on number 1 and number 3. Does anyone have any questions about conditional use standards and what their intent is?
I might have to state one more question.
Sure.
All of that's reasonable, but when you have a community that is itching, dying to make some changes, sometimes what comes before us isn't what the plan is recommending. It is definitely not consistent with the plan. And yet I think, this is why there's a citizen body to look at that and say, okay.
Can you speak in your microphone? I don't know if your microphone's on.
It was not.
Is it? But you're not being picked up by the...
Okay, sorry.
There we go.
So, as a citizen body, sometimes I think we don't always strictly adhere to the plan and the standards. And I think that causes some dissonance for all of us. But that is a reality that I think we have to accept. And that's why I like the LaSalle factors. Because those are kind of, they're intuitive and they make sense, even though the height might not be what's being recommended or the use might not be what's being recommended.
I think something to note about conditional uses is they're in that district for a reason. They're already allowed by being listed. It's just that they require some additional scrutiny. There's something about that use that there's a warrant to have them go through this process, have you review them, have the standards be evaluated determine if there are unique conditions that should be applied to it because of where it's located and because of the type of business, that then goes into the ordinance that's unique to that specific business and that property. So it's not it should not be used as red tape. It should just be used as an opportunity, like, we are okay with this use generally, but we would like to put some additional conditions on it, hence the conditional use name. But that's a great point. All right, go to the next one, variations. Basically, you're asking for an exception to the code. Everyone has to apply or comply with the same set of regulations with whatever zoning district their property is within. You're asking to not meet the code, and you have to show why you shouldn't have to. Typically, if you have a property that's like a triangular lot and you have setback requirements, obviously the setback requirements for that property are gonna be different than they are on your standard rectangular lot. That is a unique circumstance. Someone else, if they're wanting to put their garage 1 foot from the lot line, but it's supposed to be 3 feet, they can clearly move it over 3 feet, and they haven't worked with staff to comply. That's not necessarily a hardship. They're making a design choice, and their property is able to build a garage or a house that's otherwise compliant. Other things that might make a property unique would be topography changes. There's a reason that they have to locate something on the site because it's pitched lower, and the only place that they can put it compliant, it happens to be where all the water is running on the property. So they need to put it right up against the lot line and get a setback variation. That might be something to consider as a unique circumstance, but it cannot be self-created. If they can make the project comply with the code and they're just choosing to not meet it, that's not something that, you should be theoretically approving, because one of the standards is not self-created.
Before we go on, Katie, may I just touch on that last bullet point? Use variations are just terrible planning and zoning. And so a good example of what we mean by that. So a guy in a residential neighborhood gets some automobile painting equipment really cheap at an auction. And he's like, I can make some money just doing automobile painting in my garage. And his neighbor's like, well, you can't do that. This is a single family neighborhood. I'll just get a variation. No, you can't get a variation for land use. Variations are for a taller fence, or what Katie talked about, something about property structure, where you can put a garage. Those are reasonable variations, but not a variation to run a 24-hour car wash in a residential neighborhood. Those are use variations, and that's not what the variation tool is for.
Right, if they're not listed in the permitted uses and they're not listed in the conditional uses, they can't get a permit to just do it by right because it's not permitted, or if it's a conditional use and it's not listed there, they're not coming to you to get that additional scrutiny. To Andy's point, that's not going to be in your single family residential districts. So these are the variation standards that are in your city code. We kind of touched on this: particular physical surroundings, shape or topographical conditions, other things that are unique to the property. In some cases, if the house has been there several years and they're trying to build it up because they don't want to cover up more of their lot, and they might have drainage issues, so they're trying to build up and add a second story, but the house is 1 foot from the lot line, it's supposed to be 5 feet. That could be a variation. That could be considered a unique circumstance. It just depends on your view. The standards are there to help provide some level of objectivity, but variations can also have a little bit of level of subjectivity as well. Just depends on if the variation is appropriate, which then also gets to, this is similar to the conditional uses, will not be detrimental to the public welfare. I don't see this in here, but in the city of Evanston, one of the standards is, again, that it's in keeping with the intent of the code and the comprehensive plan. This is not a standard that this community has, but that's something to also kind of take in mind and as a theme when you're reviewing the other conditions. I will say that the apparent and adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property. There are no such, it is very hard to regulate or limit light and air. Easements For view sheds are very rare. There's a couple properties on the North Shore that may have them because they want to see the lake, but those are few and far between. So I think the supply of light and air, that's more getting to, you're not building a house right up next to another house, but that's really the only instance where that condition might apply. Does anyone have any questions about variation standards? No, those are kind of self-explanatory in a way. Authorized variations. So these are the variations in the code that you are able to grant and you are the determining body for. So the standards we just went through, anything that falls within this criteria, you guys will have the final vote on. And then anything else goes to the city council and they'll have the final vote. How often do you get variations like this? Regularly? Okay. So, parking?
Mm-hmm.
And landscaping.
All right. With that, I think just pass this along to Andy.
You bet. And you guys have been asking such good questions here that we're running long here, but we won't keep you here past 9.
Commissioner Grimes is leaving now, so
Okay.
When he leaves, this meeting is officially adjourned. No. We can continue the discussion.
Absolutely.
Right, Council.
Okay.
But the meeting is officially adjourned as of 8:26. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Good questions.
Very much. Appreciate you.
Okay. Okay, so the fine print, and again, we'll kind of accelerate here, but there are some really important things that I'd like to hit on here. And I'm so pleased that you have a skilled legal counsel here with you, and he can always act as a good resource here. Let's talk about ex parte communications. What is this? This means talking to applicants and even the public outside of the meeting. I'm guessing that Waukegan is a big city but a small town, and you're gonna run into people out there. Yes, Commissioner, please.
Well, we were just talking about a recent example and trying to determine if it was ex parte, and I
Okay.
don't know.
Well, good. We'll engage Marcus in that. I think that's a good question. But look at that first bullet point. That's who, right there. So you know who constitutes ex parte communication. And so you're going to run into people. I mean, you're appointed to this board. People find out about it. Friends, acquaintances. People see you on TV because everybody watches this. So somebody may approach you in the community. How are you going to vote on this? You don't get to talk about that. You don't. It's part of the job. It's tough. But the response is, and go ahead and write this on the slide on your piece of paper, please come to the meeting or email city staff. Because a lot of people can't come to the meetings. It's tough. I get it. But an email to Noel and the gang is just the same thing because you'll see it in your packets. It'll be there and it's part of the record, of the public record. So please come to the meeting. I apologize, I can't discuss this because I was appointed to the commission. It's considered ex parte communication. Throw the blame at the city. I can't. It's not your fault. You can't. You legit can't. It puts the city in legal peril, and it puts the application in legal peril. And that's not your fault. Blame Marcus, jerk. No, you can't do it. And so it's, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't. Don't make an enemy. No. Tell your neighbor, I apologize. I can't talk about this. And so please come to the meeting. And if you can't make the meeting, please email city staff. Don't tell them to email you. Yuck. Don't. Just don't. Email city staff.
Can we talk to one another?
Okay. We'll touch on that.
Here.
So all 8 of you, all 4 of you tonight can go to coffee every Sunday morning together, holding hands. But you can't talk about anything on an agenda. So can you hang out? Absolutely. Go out for a burger. And many commissions go out after meetings, So it's okay to do that, but you can't talk about anything on the agenda. Now, if there is a public with a lot of grumbling and they see you out, They're not going to believe you're not talking about it on the agenda. They're not. So, is it a good idea to hang out every Sunday? Probably not, but you can. That's not a legal thing. It's appearance, right? You can. Now, it's when a majority of the quorum, Marcus can explain what really constitutes it's an infraction of the Open Meetings Act. It's not ex parte. So we'll touch on that. But excellent question. Excellent. So ex parte, it's real. And again, appearance is reality, to most people. If perception is reality. And so if you can't go to a site and talk with the applicant, you can't. If you have questions for the applicant, that's okay to have questions. Email Noel and the gang. I have questions. I want to know, why can't they put 8 guest parking spaces in? Why do you need to have 3 driveways onto Sheridan? That is insane to me. Why? That's okay to ask that, but don't go to the site and talk to the applicant. And either save it for the meeting or email city staff about it. And they'll get you that information. That's their job, and we're good at it. They're good at it. They'll get you that information. But don't find it on your own. Don't email the applicant. Don't call the applicant. That's not your job. You can't do it. Again, get mad at the city. You can't do it. This all plays into ethics. And I won't spend a lot of time on this. Ethics is a very real responsibility for members of the commission. And it's rare that there are genuine opportunities to breach ethics because there isn't a lot of back and forth because you're not going to job sites and talking to applicants. So it's not something to worry about. One quick funny story that as a city planner, in my role, I went to the grand opening of a business that I helped open, and I won a drawing that I didn't enter for a free custom fit shirt. Oh, gosh. They meant it from a good place. It was a show of gratitude, but I told the director right away, Director, you need to know that I just received this gift for this business. And he's like, well, just let them know. Thank you for telling me. And please email them that you can't accept it. And then, it was a gift card. I had to photograph it, whole bit. And I had to return it to them. These things happen. It was an honest mistake, but they happen. And so it's from a professional standpoint, we're always aware of that. Just know that apply to you guys too. Have it in the back of your mind. Ethics are real. Conflict of interest. A lot of people are like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I have to recuse myself. It's okay to recuse yourself. It doesn't mean you're bad at your job. It doesn't mean you're a bad commissioner. Just the opposite. It means you're an amazing commissioner. If you're aware enough to be like, Noel, I'm afraid that I have a conflict of interest about this, and I really need to know whether or not I need to recuse myself. That's not a black eye. That's not a bad thing. Just the opposite. If you think there's even an inkling of a reason that you need to recuse yourself, first thing you do is email Noel and the team and let them know. That's okay. And it's especially important if, like tonight, you only have 5 commissioners. They need to know, because it is unthinkable for a member of the commission, to a member of the audience, to be like, I'd like to point out that Commissioner Rivera is actually on the board of the applicant's company. Oh, could you imagine if that happened? And you might be thinking, crap, I got to be at the meeting. I won't be doing my job if I recuse myself. Just the opposite. Just the opposite. So please know. Now, those first 2 there. So when you think about conflict of interest, what is it? Right underneath this on your slide, please make a $sign. That's a conflict of interest. Is the money. It's always the money. Money is conflict of interest. That's it. Money. Not marriage. We can make funny jokes about this, I know. But no, marriage is not a conflict of interest. And relationship, your brother's not a conflict of interest. What it is the third green, appearance of impropriety. So that is a reason to recuse yourself. If you feel that it will have enough of a negative impact, that's when you reach out to the staff and say, straight up, that's my ex-husband. I really shouldn't be on this. That's an appearance of impropriety. No $signs, but, woofda. That's a big deal. So just be aware of that, and it's okay to announce any of these. And I'm going to say it one last time. It's not a black eye. It doesn't mean you're a bad commissioner if you have a conflict of interest. This is not, these communities are not big. I mean, think about towns of 8,000, 9,000 people. Everybody knows everybody. And like I said earlier, Waukegan might be a bigger city, but it's a small town. People know people. And so, you're going to run into this. And the best thing you can do is be absolutely open and upfront about it. The best thing you can do. If you have to recuse yourself for 2 meetings in a row, it just means you're popular. It doesn't mean you're a bad commissioner. And the city council will think about taking you off. Here are the 2 tools to use when there is a conflict of interest. There's the actual recusal, but I've been in situations where commissioners just say, and this is all discussed before the meeting, but during the meeting, Mr. Chair, I need to disclose that 10 years ago I had a professional relationship with this applicant, but it no longer exists. It was terminated in 2018 or whatever, 2013. There's no longer anything there. Disclose it. And then the appearance of impropriety, gone, because you disclosed it. Everybody knows it. But if it was just last year there was a financial transaction, maybe they have a discussion with engage legal counsel, engage staff. Maybe that's a reason to recuse, just in the interest of appearance of impropriety. Okay, we already talked about this, but not a conflict of interest. So read over those. And again, staff will walk you through this. Marcus will walk you through this. It's, that you are in church groups. You are in a Boy Scout, troop. You are in these things in the community. That's why you guys are here, because you are interested in volunteer groups. So it's just disclose it. This was the OMA. Training is required. Is that correct for the commissioners?
Yes, but it hasn't been carefully provided for that.
Okay.
So that'll be coming up too.
Good. It's this online training, and it's a little bit tedious. It's really tedious to go through, but it's really valuable because there are wonderful examples of what a conflict, of what a violation of Open Meetings Act is. So do be aware of that, because again, once you guys know, once trust breaks down, it takes years to build it back, years. And so the Open Meetings Act is essential to uphold. You guys have heard the horror stories, maybe you haven't, but even when commissioners are up there, commissioners in Illinois have been up there texting one another during a meeting. Oh, God, can you imagine? Can you imagine that? So all this stuff is real. You will notice that emails from city staff that go out to the commission have everybody blind copied. And so there's not a chance for the reply all and to talk about talk about an agenda item with all 8 commissioners outside of the meeting. That's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. It's happened, and the city attorneys in the communities I work for are like, damn it, but it happens. And so you do fire control, you fix it. Okay, it happened, let's not do it again. So that's why blind copies are a best practice, because then you can't make those mistakes. So again, it's just something to have in your mind. Open Meetings Act, be very aware, hyper aware of it. So, any questions on that? Okay, let's keep moving.
Andy, sorry, real quick.
No, of course, Marcus.
One thing I don't see on the conflict of interest, and maybe it's just kind of subsumed in the business and financial relationship, is a fiduciary duty. If you have decision-making responsibilities, let's say you're on the board, right? I've always counseled that is a conflict of interest. If
Certainly.
you're on the board of an organization and you're not getting paid, but you have the ability to make decisions, and then they come up and they're an applicant, that would be
excellent.
Conflict.
Yeah, great example. So yeah, if there's any questions in your mind, commissioners, you just email the staff right away, and they'll help you figure it out. And it's good to be hyper aware, because I've had many commissioners say, "What about this? What about this?" And we run it by the city attorney, and we make a very formal determination that is not a conflict of interest. Please attend the meeting.
I have an example of that.
Please.
Community I worked for previously, it was a church, and they had what formerly had been a parsonage, and then someone was renting it, and then they were going to do a food pantry arm, kind of a partnership with the church. And one of the commissioners was on not the board for the church, but on their kind of property management arm, or recommending body for that. So he did recuse himself and left the room during that item being discussed, because that would be considered a conflict of interest.
Yeah. So, a good funny story is recusing. Recusing means leaving, like getting out. Recusing isn't walking to the back of the room, just watching and nodding. No. recusing is getting out. And during COVID, when we had meetings on Zoom, we had an architect who had worked with the applicant very recently and needed to recuse himself. So he logged off. He said, and I'm going, and so he logged off. And then after the hearing, that hearing was concluded, I had to text him, Commissioner Hainsfurther, meeting logged back on. So then he had to come back on. So recusal is out, not just not at the table. Okay, so the intent of the next eight slides or so that I'm going to go through quickly is to just share with you a bit of background. City planning, you guys are citizen planners, and planning has a long and rich history, and especially in the Chicago area. You know, we all on this side of the dais are very lucky to work here. Chicago is one of the best places in the country to do what we do. The American Planning Association is based out of Chicago. They have a Washington, D.C. office as well, but Chicago is a hub for city planning. And it gets back to Daniel Burnham, one of the founders. There's a wonderful book by the name of Devil in the White City. Does it? Okay, you guys know it. It's a wonderful read, and it's all about the World's Fair that he had a big thing to do with. Jane Addams is a founding thinker in city planning, and you know, we're standing on the shoulders of geniuses like her and Jane Jacobs. So this is all by way of saying, yeah, here's just read through these quick little bullet points here. The history of planning is a fun study, and there's a lot of resources out there to just to glean some really cool information. So it's not just you guys. There's a lot of people have come before you and have fought the same thoughts, asked the same questions, banged your head against the same microphones. It's not easy. It's and there's just a long legacy of support that goes behind it and history of this. So tools of the trade are some of the some of the main tools that go into what we do. There are a lot of terms we've already talked about tonight, but Katie will run through these with you.
All right, again, trying to be efficient with this. So policy planning, there's several different types of plans. Some of them this body may or may not be a part of or contribute to directly, such as the preservation plan. If you have a preservation commission, that's something that they may do. Neighborhood plan is typically more of a local-based plan. Comprehensive plan is for the whole city. Some communities have a downtown plan, so it's really about building up your downtown. But they're all kind of related to that. And then, of course, there's also your CIP or capital improvements plan. So that's something the city council looks at to assess where they want to do any infrastructure improvements with the city. Comprehensive plan. So we've kind of touched on it, but this is basically, you know, you're setting a horizon for 40 to 50 years in the future, but you typically want to update them every 10 to 15 years, ideally. I know, given some of the market circumstances, a lot of communities are behind in updating this, but it's more or less the city trying to set its ideals and what does it want to continue to be and continue to develop into, and then it can also serve as a basis for the decisions you're making on case-by-case bases with your zoning projects. So comprehensive plan also covers all of these topics. Again, future land use, sustainability is becoming more and more in the forefront, so that's something that can be considered. Economic development, affordable housing, so where do you want to increase density in housing if that's feasible in certain areas? Transportation, are you incorporating different modes of transportation? It kind of covers high level all of these topics. Public participation in planning. So this is where it can get kind of fun if you're developing any of the plans I just mentioned. Typically, you do charrettes where you're kind of visioning out what this woman's doing here, looking at a map, putting things out. Focus groups, looking at a site or trying to pick parts of your city where you want to see redevelopment, or there's a lot that has just sat vacant for like 15 years and you really want to see something cool. That's where people can get excited, and you all can also be the lead and ultimately take votes on some of these, on the comprehensive plan as you recommend to the city council. Working with the public, this will come up if you're developing any long-range plans, but the way that you're primarily functioning is working with them in a more structured format for a legal purpose as a quasi-judicial body, but there are other ways to work with the public that are more informal, just to solicit feedback from the public and help the community develop the vision for it. Who are your neighbors? So this is, again, we've touched on this before, but think about who is in the room, but also who's not in the room. So what are the demographics of the city of Waukegan? Where are those demographics typically, where are certain populations clustered in the community? And also, how does that impact the types of businesses that goes in those areas? And plan implementation, find a couple of these. I mentioned CIP, I mentioned the TIF district, and SSA is a special service area. Those are types of districts that when the majority of the property owners are in favor of it, they'll establish the districts, and there is a literal special assessment that they'll pay on their tax bill for additional services. For example, something that they can be used for is for placemaking, or making sure you have all of the nice matching garbage containers and the benches and the light posts, and you have a certain sidewalk design in your downtown. So that's typically what SSAs are used for. I don't know if anyone has any questions about any of these, but the procedures, development review, those are covered in the next couple of slides with regulating development. So there are several ways to regulate development. We've got zoning, which is the code. Those are things that must be done or they're not allowed at all. And then you have design guidelines, where those are, you would really like it if you would, is the best way to think of those. So you're kind of trying to encourage some best practices, but they're not necessarily the law that they have to follow. So zoning, touched on this before, but you're regulating the use of the property, how tall the buildings are going to be, how close they are to the other lot lines, how much green space, how much parking, really breaking all of that down and just figuring out how dense you want the development to be, not just in population, but just how big is it going to be. And the zoning districts are the way that we regulate that.
You just go back to that one slide, because I'd like to share one important concept. The biggest, the cynic in the room, the biggest cynical comment is zoning schmoning. You can't tell me what I can do on my property. And my response is, no, that's not what zoning does. It controls what your neighbor can do on his. That's the rule of zoning. That's why zoning is powerful. It's because it's the first person that that man who that cynic will run to when their neighbor does something wrong is you guys in the city. What? Look what they're doing. They can't do that. This is the same guy who says, you can't tell me what I can do on my property. So zoning is there to uphold property values and maintain, and so that's, and I'll say it again. No. Zoning isn't telling what you can do on your property. It's controlling what your neighbor can do to his property. Oh, yeah, thanks. So that's it. And I think that's just a very important distinction. So just have that in the back of your mind, because that's coming handy.
And that's where the standards are helpful when you're reviewing cases for zoning relief in your role within the city government, because you don't want to just deny something or allow something because someone doesn't like their neighbor or they really, really want their friend to have a favor. So zoning districts, you typically, most communities regulate with the Euclidean type of zoning. So you've got your residential districts where you only have residential, you've got your commercial districts, you have your industrial districts. There are different types of zoning, but I think if you have more specific questions about that, I'll defer to staff at a later time. But that's really just you're going to allow different types of buildings and different uses based on the zoning district you're in.
And one key point I'll get to that, but I do want to say that it's called exclusionary zoning. Where it just excludes certain uses and others. And there is a movement. Zoning has gone pretty far. Some say it's gone too far in excluding diverse and interesting uses that it can actually be really valuable and really enhance the fabric of a community and make it more interesting. And zoning, in a lot of ways, zoning's like, nope, you can't do it. And there's been kind of a walking back of that and a realization that a diversity of uses in a mix can actually be a positive. And so the broad term is zoning reform. Perhaps you'll run into that in some of the literature you read. So there's been kind of a rethinking about, does it need to be this way, or does it need to be as strict as it has become, in the last 60, 50 years. So just have that in the back of your mind that, okay, it might be okay to revisit zoning in the strictest sense that it is now.
That all does go back to the court case that was mentioned earlier, the Euclid versus Amber Realty in Ohio. The Euclidean-based zoning, basically making sure it was so industrial doesn't go right next to residential is the point, but it's obviously gone much further than that, to Andy's point. Types of zoning approval, we went through the standards for some of these. Permitted uses, you can just go and get your building permit, make sure you meet building fire codes. Variation or variance, you have to prove unique hardship or circumstance that justifies why you shouldn't meet the code that everybody else has to follow. Conditional use, it's allowed, but you just need additional conditions that and requires that additional scrutiny. And the planned development or planned unit development, those are really large projects. Every community has different thresholds that trigger them or require them, but their standards for review are different. I think those are later in the slides, but planned development, it's an opportunity for the developer to be a bit creative and to not follow the zoning code to the letter, but they do have different standards to still make sure that the project they're proposing is appropriate for that site. So there are benefits to the developer because of the flexibility. Everything is specific to that property and that project. And then the benefits to the municipality, there's usually some sort of trade-off. Like, what is this project bringing to the community? How is it enhancing this part of this block, this part of the downtown, this part of this neighborhood? And then oftentimes it may happen in a TIF district. It's not all the time, but it's another way to kind of incentivize really great development that is good for the community. It's going to bring more residents and or jobs, whatever the benefits are to that. So it's a planned development. I don't know if there's...
Yeah, one fun thought game for you is that in a planned development, you can consider a project that has a number of modifications to the zoning code. All right, the setbacks are smaller, the garages are really wide, the buildings are all 3.5 feet taller than allowed by zoning because it makes a cool uniform development and it makes sense. That's different than a variation. You know the standards for a variation are hard. There needs to be a hardship. There are very strict standards. And so it's really hard to request a variation. You need to have a hardship. But when you look at a planned unit development, that's different. You can incorporate modifications to the zoning code. You can call them variations if you want, but they're not because it's not the same discussion, not the same standards. So just have that to be a back of your mind, that a variation to have a taller fence, to put your garage closer to the property line on your triangular lot is different than a planned unit development and those modifications to the code. And to Katie's point, look at those benefits to the municipality. You get a public benefit. The developer has to provide some benefit to the community because you're granting these modifications. So it's a win in a lot of ways. And this planning tool has been around since the 50s, like the plan development tool. Some people call it a mini zoning code, but I don't like that. And it's a benefit because the community, Waukegan, sees a pretty special development that has all these quirks and these neat things about it. Yeah, we had to give them 3.5 feet. We had to cut down on their parking because we did, all this and this, but look at this green space that we got. So it's a discussion about what the benefits to the municipality are that are, what was the word in Highland Park, that are commensurate with the amount of zoning relief being granted. So if they're only asking for relief for 2 parking spaces, okay, we don't need a whole lot of benefit. But if they're asking to provide no parking and another story and, and no landscaping, whoa, then we're talking some public benefit discussion there because it's got to be, the idea is that it's commensurate with the relief they're getting. Does that make sense?
They were commonly used when subdivisions were, I guess the term now is sprawl, to kind of create the unique neighborhoods of the single-family subdivisions. But now that the sprawl has kind of petered out, it is kind of it's being used more in downtowns and higher density areas for some of the multifamily mixed-use developments. We touched on this earlier when I talked about conditional uses and how you can, if you don't want it in that district, you need to remove it from the list of conditional uses. But the idea is to keep zoning current. So some communities will do either if They have the staff capacity every 6 months, ideally once a year. They're cleanup text amendments. The code that I'm working in now is from 1993, so it's had several amendments over the years, but other communities maybe more recently rewrote it, or they rewrote a chapter to try to improve some procedures. There are always things that can be worked upon. The code is just like any law. It's a living document. It can always be changed. It just does need to follow the public hearing process with this body and then on to City Council before it becomes law. Example of the plan development process. Again, we talked about what a plan development is. So typically you'll have an informal review. The developer is going to have probably 10 to 20% of design development. It's still kind of like a almost cartoon phase, back of napkin sketch of here's this property, here's what I want to put a 4-story building and I want to put 20 apartments in it. I'm only going to put 5 parking spaces. What do you guys think? You guys are not going to vote on it. You're going to provide comments and you're going to provide feedback. Any members of the public you can use, it's not necessarily a hearing, but you can still kind of structure it in that way and have people come up and speak for 3 minutes or whatever you decide. And then the developer will, theoretically will go make some edits to what he's designed. He's going to come in and then he's going to submit an application and staff's going to review it. And then staff's going to tell him, oh, well, you need X, Y, and Z modifications or deviations, whatever the term is. Is it deviations?
Modifications.
Modifications here. So modifications to plan developments. And then they're kind of going to continue to work with them, make sure the stormwater is okay, all of those things. And then they'll come here for the public hearing, and you'll do the public hearing as you do for your variations and conditional uses. Ultimately, then you're going to make a recommendation to the City Council, and then the ordinance that's passed is the special zoning code for that property and for that project, and it'll be the framework for when they submit for building permit. So staff is then going to make sure their building permit drawings, which are construction level drawings, match what you guys looked at and match what the City Council approved. So any questions about that process specifically? Okay. Subdivision, you could do a plan unit development as a subdivision, but otherwise if someone's subdividing a lot and it meets all the minimum lot size requirements for that zoning district, some communities, if it's a 2-lot split and both lots are allowed, they're the minimum width and the minimum area, it's an administrative procedure. Other times it still does go through all the way through the process, but it's really just dividing the land, and it also does provide an opportunity for the city to put in requirements for what the public way should look like. So then if they're building a new development, they're creating new lots, they're building a new road, the road and the sidewalk and the parkway and the trees, those are all standards that are in the subdivision code. So your public works they typically will coordinate with the community development staff and make sure that all of those improvements are up to city standards, and then they're able to build on the lot. And depending on what they need zoning wise, they may come back to you again or they'll be able to build it by right and get their permits. Subdivision regulations kind of covered that. Annexation, you're basically taking land that's unincorporated and making it incorporated. So you're just literally moving the legal boundary of the city of Waukegan. So unincorporated property, the zoning regulations for Waukegan don't apply. You can't enforce them upon those properties. That would just be Lake County. But if they do become incorporated, then city of Waukegan has zoning authority over those properties. Voluntary annexation, there's an annexation agreement. Typically, there's some requirements to get hooked up to water and sewer, and there's a certain amount of time that they're going to have to pay to extend any water lines. Depends on where the water lines are in proximity to the property. Forced annexation, required to be less than 60 acres, and you have to be completely surrounded. So like you've boxed in this property, they can be annexed and they don't have to like it. I have not seen it happen. I've not actually processed it before, but it's in the state law that a city can do that if they're completely surrounding a property. And that's it with that. Any, did you want to add anything to those slides? Okay.
That's solid.
Okay, cool.
So you pass out the URLs. So we're done. I am going to close. So first, let me tell you that Katie's going to pass out these evaluations. As I mentioned, this is a training program we're very proud of, and we are continually improving it. So if you would, kindly fill that out, and then we'll collect those. And if you have any ideas, any feedback, it'd be most welcome. So while you're writing, these last slides here are about resources to support you guys. You are not alone with plan commissioners. There are plan commissioners in cities all over the country, and they, like you, are volunteers. We as professional planners want to help you do your job better. So you'll find websites on that last slide. And I really invite you to look at the APA's website, planning.org. They have a library of wonderful resources. And then you can geek out on planning just like we do. And it's a field where you can just never stop learning. So that's why we love it. So that's it, guys. Thank you. So go ahead and fill those out.
I just like to say thank you. I am a new commissioner. I've been here since January.
Oh, wow.
And so I've felt very, this has been very helpful to me, and I appreciate that a lot. Everybody here is very supportive, and I think that based on what you said and how we run the meetings here for the last 4 months that I've been here, I think that we're pretty good. I mean, based on the direction that you gave us. There's
I'm glad to hear that.
Improvement for sure.
Sure.
But definitely, I'm impressed with how well we do, and you guys do. So I would like to just say that.
That's great to hear.
And I want to thank you for taking your time to do this for us.
You bet, Mr. Chair.
We've been needing this for some time, and this kind of helps me to solidify in my mind just exactly what we're here for and what our function is.
Awesome.
So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Hope to have you back again.
All right. Keep in touch with Noel and the crew.
Also wanna thank you as well.
And young planners, did you learn something? It does my heart good.
Am I on? Yeah. I'd just like to add for you that if any of you are interested in joining the APA, I would be glad to pay for that membership out of my department's budget. If you're wanting to continue your education, and as it was pointed out, commissioners can join. So would be happy to have you join as representatives of the city. So just let me know if you'd like to do that, and I'll make sure that we have all the information for your application to get membership.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you both so much. Appreciate your contributions tonight. It's been really terrific for all of us. Yeah, thank you.